4 has us rewriting equations, which is the same as solving for another variable. This means we're not going to come down to x is 2. We're going to come down to y is 3/4 x minus 8. We're going to have more than one variable involved in the equation, and we're going to be solving for one of the specific variables. The process to do this, though, is the exact same as if we were solving for a number. When we solve for any letter, we're first going to look to distribute. Get rid of any grouping symbols that we may have. Same thing that we do with our numbers. We're going to combine like terms, meaning if there's variables on two sides, we're going to get them to be the same. If there's variables on the same side, we're going to get them to be the same. Then we add or subtract any terms that are added or subtracted to the one we want. We called this a constant when we deal with our numbers, but now it could be an actual letter. And the last thing we do is multiply or divide out the coefficient, or whatever it is that's being multiplied to the letter we want. Our goal is to focus on the letter that we want. All right, but the process itself is the same as what we do when we have numbers. So we're going to look at a couple of examples. X minus 3y is 4, and we're going to solve for y. This is a very common one because in the next chapter when we start looking at our lines and graphing lines, we should be familiar with y equals mx plus b, and there's two variables in that one. These happen to be the same two, and having it y equals is the common one that we want. So our goal is to get y by itself. That means we have to get rid of the x and we have to get rid of the negative 3. Well, we don't have any grouping symbols to distribute through. There's nothing that are like terms. So I need to add and subtract whatever is added and subtracted to the y. Well, I only have two options, x or the negative 3. The negative 3 is being multiplied, so that is not add subtract. The x, however, is separated, and it is being added because there is a plus sign out front there, even though you don't see it. So we're going to get rid of the x by subtracting it. We get negative 3y is negative x plus 4. Now the reason I do that is because, again, we're leading into the next chapter. But if for this chapter, if you put 4 minus x, it's still the same thing. But to get in the habit for next chapter, when we're talking about y equals mx plus b in our lines, it's best to start putting things in the proper order. Then we have divide by a negative 3. And when I divide everything by the negative 3. So for this chapter, again, if you wanted to leave it as negative x plus 4 over negative 3, that's fine. But to get into the habit of what we're going to be doing next chapter, we would want to be putting in the proper form. Negative x, negative 3, plus 4x, minus 3, and then simplify that. So that negative negative is actually positive 1/3 x, and positive negative is actually negative 4/3. So that's what kind we're looking for. However, for this chapter, if you put down y equals and then just all of it written together, you're going to be okay. Just make sure everything is simplified as far as it can, if it can be. All right, next example. 2 pi r8, how about s equals 2 pi rh plus 2 pi r squared, and we're going to solve for h. All right, so h is what we want. That means I need to get rid of everything else that is on the same side as h. There are no parentheses, there are no fractions, so that's good. When I look at combining like terms, I don't have like terms. I have pi r here, and I have pi r squared on the other one. Those are not alike. The exponent changes them. Therefore, I can't just combine them. So I want to get rid of the add and subtract, things that are added and subtracted to this h. Well, what's added and subtracted to this h is actually this 2 pi r squared. So that's what we're going to move over. S minus 2 pi r squared, because it was added, so opposite is to subtract. And then since I want h and everything is multiplied to it, opposite is to divide. So h equals this big O thing. Now, for this chapter, it is completely okay to leave things like that. When we're talking about solving for any variable, generally this will be okay when we have all these extraneous letters in there, a pi, an r, an s. However, if you want to simplify it down, you may, but you better make sure that you simplify it correctly. If you don't, you will lose points for it. You need, if you're going to separate it, it would be separated to both terms. So s over 2 pi r minus 2 pi r squared over 2 pi r. The first one does not reduce, so it would stay as 2 pi r. The second one, the 2 does reduce, the pi does reduce, and the r reduces the exponent. So it would be minus r. So I would accept either one of those answers. I would recommend you leave it as the first one, simply because you can. And if you reduce it incorrectly, you would lose points. But that's how we're going to solve for any letters. We're going to use the exact same method that we do when we're solving for a number. And then use the properties down so that we get the letter that we want equal to whatever is left over. And that is going to wrap it up for 1.4.